Go for it.
Hello, and welcome to Boffer Artillery. My name is William Dean, and I'm known to AMCART as Avi. I joined AMCART in 2005 and the SCA in 2010. Since then, I've published 2 books on pre-gunpowder artillery. I'm starting this channel with the goal of improving artillery in medieval and fantasy games. So to that end, we'll look at the math, science, and history behind artillery while learning what makes the biggest bang. We'll study particular design types, looking at what makes particular machines work. We'll do interviews with various siege engineers, and most importantly, we'll shoot a whole bunch of different types of siege engines. You're probably also going to see my dogs at some point. Our video today is going to introduce a couple of basic terms, some key concepts that will hopefully make understanding mechanical artillery a whole lot easier as we go on. First, why do I say artillery instead of siege engine? The key goal here is that artillery launches something. I want to distinguish artillery from other types of machines, because I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about siege towers, battering rams, or the like. I'm focusing solely on large machines that throw stuff. Next, we need to understand the concept of motive force. Motive force is simply what powers a projectile through the air. In the modern world, the motive force of any given projectile is most commonly some form of explosive, such as gunpowder or cordite. In the ancient world, motive forces were commonly flexion and torsion. Flexion is the power of something attempting to unbend or unflex, and torsion is something trying to untwist. We'll talk about both of those in greater detail in a later video. The medieval world introduces concepts such as counterweighting and traction. Again, we'll cover those both in greater detail as we go on. Now, the main point of this video, if you've studied armor, all of what I'm about to say will sound familiar. Hollywood and Victorian-era historians are famous for confusing different types of armor and coming up with all sorts of silly ideas. They look at the bio tapestry and the different ways that chain is depicted on it, and they think that, oh, different picture on the same piece must be a different type of armor, rather than looking at it and saying, okay, different artists are depicting the same thing different ways. So they come up with various names, all kinds of different names. And we end up running into the exact same problem, only worse, when we're studying mechanical artillery. The names such as scorpion, trebuchet, catapult, and ballista are very confused in the literature. You get all kinds of different depictions, like Robin Hood Men in Tights' stealth catapult, the ballistas shown in Kingdom of Heaven, and all kinds of different ideas. Some confusion is related to Hollywood, some from the Victorian era, some of it dates as far back as the ancient world. You'll have different people tell you, machine here is a catapult, not an onager. This is a scorpion, it's not a ballista. And really, any attempt to give those names to different machines is actually a waste of your time. Now, to be fair to Hollywood, this tradition does go back as far as the ancient world. There's one ancient source dating from the 4th century AD, a guy named Ammianus Marcellinus, who gives 3 different names for the same machine in one sentence. The opening sentence of his passage describing a one-armed catapult is, "The machine, commonly known as the scorpion, is in today's modern world also known as an onager and something of a soldier's joke." As you can see, 3 different names for one machine in one sentence. Ammianus actually gets it even worse by giving a fourth name for that machine later on in the two-paragraph passage. Using the word scorpion as an example, we see that Ammianus uses it to refer to an engine with a single arm that is large and intended to hurl rocks. A source from about 3.5 centuries earlier, towards the fall of the Roman Republic, early days of the Roman Empire, uses the word scorpion specifically to refer to a small arrow-shooting catapult. Ballistas go from being large, two-armed stone-throwing machines to being small arrow-shooting machines, and even later on, the word is applied to crossbows. So as you can see, the names are a mess even in the ancient world. And yet it gets even worse from there. As we move into the medieval world, there's a scholar named Aegidius, and he provides wonderful engineering and military information. However, the names he gives to various types of engines he describes are problematic. He decided to take the 4 types of machines he described and give 3 of them Latin names. He then attributed those Latin names to the legions of ancient Rome. Now, there are a couple of problems with this. First of all, the names he uses show up nowhere other than his book. Second, and far more damning, is that the machines he's describing did not exist in ancient Rome. They weren't invented for another 500 years after the fall of the western half of the empire. Really, Aegidius just made up these names so that he could sound wiser and more educated than he was. So, if names like mangonel and ballista are pretty well useless, what words should we use? We could try to rely on the ancient Greek tradition, since the Greeks did invent the first Western artillery. But words like palintone and euthytone really won't get us very far. They leave out the entire later Western tradition. They cut out a huge chunk of Rome, and so we shouldn't use that. Instead, I'm going to propose a different approach. This is what's been used by guys like Marsden and Schramm, and it is a descriptive naming convention. First, we have to understand that the word catapult is a generic word. It refers to any machine that uses a mechanical process to throw something. So, as long as it is a non-explosive device, it is a catapult. We use catapults to launch aircraft from the decks of aircraft carriers. In England, what is called a slingshot in the United States is called a catapult. The trebuchets of the medieval world are catapults. It's kind of like how all cats are mammals, but not all mammals are cats. Ballistas, onagers, trebuchets, whatever word you want to use, those are all subsets of the larger category of catapult. Now, if I'm going to talk about a more specific type of catapult, I'm generally speaking going to name it based on how it's powered and how many arms it has. For example, my machine Soft Kitty, which should be appearing on your screen, has 2 arms and is powered by torsion. Thus, I will refer to her as a 2-armed torsion engine. If I need to get more specific, like distinguishing between 2-armed torsion engines that hurl rocks in place of arrows, I'll say something to the effect of stone-throwing 2-armed torsion engine. In summary, catapult is a generic word, and I will name machines based on how they function, rather than trying to make sense and apply a rather nonsensical system of historical names to these machines. If you'd like to know more, links to my books will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in a later episode. Tschüss!